So in this video, I'm just gonna go over my process in making this animation. So I'll just start playing it. It starts out with the sun, and just using this slider, we can switch it to be a moon. And it is animated, by the way. These stars are kind of shimmering and moving. Very slowly though. And we can switch it back to the sun at any point. And this is fully procedural and in 3D. Okay, so let's just delete all of our nodes and restart from scratch. So the first thing I'm gonna do is make 2 circles like this. Here's our first. It will have a threshold of 0.5, and our second will have a threshold of slightly bigger, 0.54. Or maybe we could switch it to 0.58. And we could actually do this with one length node. So let's do that. And now let's start a second part of this sun, which are the rays. So these will be important soon, but to make them important, we need to make these rays. So let's get a gradient texture, set this to radial, and we'll want the factor output instead of the color, since the color will have a bit more data and it will be a bit slower on our computer. It's just a good rule of thumb to use factor for this. We're just dealing with black and white values. Okay, let's set it to radial and multiply this by about 10. I know it's 10 because I just recorded this tutorial already, so I'm doing that again. Now we'll set it to fraction and do a subtract by 0.5. This will give us some negative values. Remember, we can't see negative values. They just cut off to black once they're under 0. So now let's flip our negatives using an absolute node. And this gives us this nice ray material. It's like from a sun. Let's use less than. And as our threshold, instead of just a single value, let's use this length. I'm duplicating it so you can use it for later. This length as a threshold, which you'll immediately see, it looks like a flower. So this is actually a really cool way to make patterns like flowers in almost no time. It's really quick. And it's also in real time. If you use these sliders as your X and Y, it runs in real time instead of needing for it to, update once you release. But what I want to do is change this interpolation to look about like this. And now it looks sharp. Well, I'm making a cartoon sun, so it should be sharp. And from here, we should set our less than node to greater than to make this middle value, this middle shape, a value of 1, and make everything else a value of 0. Okay. Now let's subtract by this bigger circle that we have made already. That would be this top one. I'm actually gonna raise all of these nodes a bit. Okay, let's subtract by the bigger circle to get this output. I think actually we could change this to be a bit smaller. And something like that should work great. And now let's color it. So we can do this usually by pressing not pressing Q, because you might not have it in your quick favorites, but I can do it with Q because of quick favorites and get a mix color node. And you'll notice it's completely white because we're just mixing between 2 white values. So I'll set the background to black. And our sun rays are usually yellowish. I'm gonna make this desaturated yellow and slightly bright, just so that the main central circle will look a bit brighter. So let's do that now. And let's select a color that's more saturated, slightly reddish, and increase its brightness. Okay, Now we can add these together, setting this mix operation to add, making sure that the factor, is at 1, because for add, if it's not 1, we get some slightly opaque colors, and for our purposes, we want it to be 1. And now we have a sun. And you'll notice it's not rotating, but in mine, it was rotating. So one thing we can do to do that, we can make that happen with a vector rotate node, which rotates our sun rays. And what we want to do is rotate it 1 increment per frame. So let's just take the frame data by typing in #frame and dividing that by about 20. So let's play that. And it works. Here's our sun animation. And of course we can change the colors at any time to be darker or brighter. And that applies to the rays too. And we can make them green or blue. But let's keep it about here and move on to the moon. The moon is slightly more difficult. It also involves a lot of circles, just like the sun. So let's do that here. Finding the length of all vectors to get this gradient and using less than. What we want to do now is duplicate this. Oh, and by the way, this previous sun can be a bit more streamlined by merging these 2 lengths into 1. So I'll do that now. Instead of using too many nodes, you can just do that. But for the moon, we do want to have separate circles in separate nodes, because now we can change their positions without affecting the other. So let's change this one to be slightly to the right, and we'll also want to multiply it, making sure that we multiply by 1 first to just get our normal state, and now we can slightly increase it to squish it on the X only. And now let's take this circle and subtract it by this circle. There we go. Here is a crescent moon, and you can always tweak these to be any kind of moon shape you'd like. I'm gonna have it about like that. And from here, we can shift it to the left or to the right a tiny bit, just like this. And that's very good, a very good moon shape, just using a few circles. But now what we want to do is add this gradient of going from 0 to 1, and then we can have it be slightly darker on the bottom and slightly brighter on the top, which is just a nice way to add depth, basically. So let's separate X, Y, Z, find Y, and from here, let's mix color. And by the way, you can use some vector math here to scale it, and this is not necessary for all of the gradient right now, but I'm just doing this for fun. And now we can use this as a factor to mix between, let's see. Now we can use this as a factor, and it's again white because we're mixing between white and white. Let's make this bottom one slightly darker. You'll notice our brighter value is way up here. So let's bring that down and multiply even more to change our fall off. And now we get a gradient between this gray and this gray. So let's set this to a moon color. I would say a desaturated orange and maybe a yellowish, slightly brighter yellow. But yeah, we'll tweak it later. And now let's use this as a factor. So that would go here. This would be black. Let's just get an HSV node to increase our value, which increases the brightness basically. And from here, let's add our stars. So using object coordinates, let's add a Voronoi texture. And our stars seem complicated, but they are only one single node. I'm actually gonna order this up a bit. Okay, they're actually one single node. So let's get the distance of the Voronoi texture. We'll set this to, well, I'll tell you later. And we'll set this to, I think it was Manhattan. And now we can do less than. Oh, actually, this is the wrong one. We actually want Minkowski. Right. And this greater than will choose the scale of our stars. And now to animate them, we will set this to 4D, which gives us this special seed value, which basically chooses the randomness. It's not technically randomness, but you could just call it randomness. And we want to, just like last time with the sun, we want to set this to #frame divided by a really big number, I think 500. Yeah, and it's sparkling around. Great. So now we have a great star system, and what we want to do is color this in. So we want the stars to be kind of yellow. Let's use this as a factor. That's kind of the main tool that I want to showcase in this video, using a mix color to give color to your projects, and set the background to black. I wonder what color we should make the stars, something like this, and make them very bright. That looks about right. And instead of having just a black background on the moon, let's set the background to be the stars. And now we can view it, and it looks like this. Really nice. And of course we can play this animation to have the stars shimmer and move around a bit. And over here we have our sun, which is also animated. So now our only last step is to mix these together using a mix RGB node and changing this factor to switch between them. So let's play the animation. Very cool. I hope you guys liked this episode. I hope you guys learned to use the Mix RGB node and have fun with it. Bye.